And our guest today, I'm gonna have to look at my notes because he has a very lengthy bio. Our guest has more than 3 decades of experience in sports management, news media, higher education, and as an entrepreneur. Currently, as a professor at USC, he teaches sports business and media, sports tech, sports film, as well as a special assignment reporting class, a graduate sports reporting class, which I'm currently in, which we came back from just now. And also, what's really remarkable as well, on top of all that, he's been a Heisman Trophy voter since 2007, one of only 43 in California and 925 nationally who have been invited to participate in the selection process for the most prestigious individual award in sports. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest for the Get Back podcast, Jeff Fellenzer.
Ashton, it's a pleasure to be with you. Let's get back. It's fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me on this Friday.
My pleasure.
And I want to ask you a little bit because every Friday I see you. Fridays are like my cheat days, right? So, I might go to the little spot we have here, get like a Panda Express or something, break from the diet and everything like that. But I always see you with a student of one of yours, brother, in your class currently, and you're just having a conversation with them. What is your purpose behind that, right? Like we were talking about capturing footage. Like I wanted to capture some footage of you. It's just so unique. It's like the whole area. I wish I had like some video to show you guys, but it's like the whole area of students going back and forth and having all types of conversations. But you're just sitting there talking with the student. You're so locked into what the student has and like whatever they come to you with. So what is your purpose behind being there for students and everything?
Well, you have office hours. As a professor, you make yourself available when you can. And I just found where we're located and the beautiful weather that instead of sitting in the office when we finish, and it's kind of nice to get outside. We've been inside for a couple hours with our sports grad class. I meet a student outside. I need to grab lunch, sit down. And so I said, why don't I just stay out here rather than just have lunch, go back into an office? And I love my office. But let's just stay out and the weather's beautiful. We can't do this every city in the country, every university. So we can do it here. So I just tell students I'm out on the food court. You can see me. You'll find me. If you don't, here's my number. Just text me. And so I just end up having the students come there, and I love being able to help them where I can. I think I do a lot of meetings because sports is different than other professions. It's very nonlinear. There's not just a prescribed path you get on, and boom, you get. You do an internship, and in law school it might be while you're in law school, and then you do a summer program, and you clerk, and boom, if things go well, you have a job waiting for you. It's very much unlike that in sports. It's based on taking advantage of opportunities, building your network, building your own profile. So the students I meet with, for the most part, there's some that, of course, we're talking about the class that they're in, but most of it is bigger picture stuff. It's about getting on the right career path in sports. And sports has such a broad landscape. I think you've seen that in my classes. I try to bring in guests and friends and former students that are at various stages of their careers. So my students can get an idea and get a snapshot of maybe where they might see themselves. So I spent a lot of time talking to students about ways to put yourself in position to get the job that you want, or at least to be able to take in the landscape and figure out maybe where your niche might be, because it's so broad. And where you think you might be headed could change dramatically over a period of a few years. And that's what you're in college for. Yeah. Try to figure these things out.
And we've talked about how there are new positions coming into the sports world, sports media world, sports production world, all these type of little areas in this world of sports that probably weren't around when you were my age, right?
Right,
so,
right. Very
not
much.
spreading yourself too thin. And we're going to get into a little bit of, the history that you had in this broad world and the people you've come across to. But I wanted to just get right into it. I just wanted to ask you a real personal question, because my whole long 23 years of life, right, but I've still never came across somebody who is as passionate as for sports stories, right? Like the stories, and whether it's the high school football scene or these areas where you wouldn't necessarily look at to find these stories. I never feel like come across somebody as passionate and as driven and into that as you. You have a weekly segment, the Wooden Award, which we'll get into, or the Wooden List that we'll get into a little bit later. But I just wanted to ask you, you spent a career teaching students that sports are more about the scores, they're about people, emotion, and meaning. But you personally, your own legacy, what do you hope students remember about your story?
Well, I hope it's the passion that you mentioned, and wanting to connect them to wherever their niche might be and their passion, that there's a place for it somewhere in sports, because I don't think you will find better stories and better storytelling than in sports. The nature of the games themselves, where you have heroes and you have dramatic, epic victories and comebacks and individual comebacks, and the arcs just head from somebody coming out of nowhere and like achieving something that nobody expected, and you know, all of the I think all of the color and pageantry that sports is, it really fundamentally comes right back to um, people and extraordinary people. So I feel I've always just really connected with that. And I think growing up in Southern California, it was a magical time of these, iconic franchises. The Lakers in the still fairly early years of building the Laker brand that we know it today. It's one of the top 5 sports brands in the world. But there was a time when the players were on the backs of would be in the back of a truck driving through streets of LA trying to get people excited about the Lakers. So, and the Dodgers, and USC football, UCLA basketball, Wayne Gretzky with the Kings, the Olympics that have been here now twice and about to come for a third time in 2028. So growing up, and these incredible storytellers that I grew up listening to and watching, like Chick Hearn with the Lakers, or Vin Scully with the Dodgers, and Bob Miller with the Kings, and Dick Enberg with a number of sports, Don Drysdale, former Dodger pitcher turned broadcaster. I mean, Bryant Gumbel started as a local sports news anchor, got discovered, and kind of pulled out of LA and brought to New York, and his career took off. So when you grow up like that and you see all these things around you, I was just wide-eyed, and I couldn't get enough of it. And so when I would get the question of what are you going to do, what do you want to be when you grow up, it would be, I want to be involved in sports. And I remember the first thing I said when that question would come up, like, in middle school or something, I said, I think I want to be general manager of the Dodgers, to run a baseball team. And the funny thing is, I never became the general manager of the Dodgers, but it's almost like the gods looked down and said, well, you know what we're going to do instead? You're going to become very good friends, close to best friends, with a bunch of former general managers of the Dodgers. So Fred Clare and Ned Colletti and Dan Evans and Kevin Malone. I looked at, and I like, these guys had sat in that big chair, and we became friends and colleagues, and they were guests in my class. And Ned Colletti now teaches a class at Pepperdine because he so enjoyed being a guest in my class at USC. He said, I want to do that. Wow. And I want to build something like you've built at USC. So he now teaches classes at Pepperdine in sports media and sports business. So I always say that I look at jobs, and how I think about jobs that I've had. I measure them by the people that I got a chance to work with and for. And I think that there's no profession that gives you the connection to incredible, amazing people than sports. People that work in sports, and then when you examine the sports world, and you look at where great stories are that I like to share with my students. They're in sports. So many of them, and the people I've met through sports. That's what I'm talking to my students about when you see me talking out there.
And we have a merger here for those that might not know. I do have like a bit of some people outside of USC that might tune into my podcast here and there, but we have a merger here, USC Next Level Sports, which is the merger between Annenberg, our communication and journalism school, and Marshall, our business school. So it's the merger of sports media and sports business.
Yep.
How important, especially in today's climate, like we talk about endless conversations about the live sports kind of like niche, right? Like bringing making live sports more accessible to people that might not afford it. So one of those is the Cosm Studios, which is an immersive thing. So how important is that merger, would you say, in today's sports climate?
Well, I think sports and sports media and sports business, I mean, it's no longer just like there's a blurry line, a fine line dividing sports and business. Forget that line. It's full on merged. Like you can't look at a sports website or in a newspaper on a front page and not see half the stories there that wouldn't have a connection to business, whether it's contracts or media rights deals. We've seen it in college with NIL or conference realignment. Schools that are joining national conferences like USC and UCLA did. They basically left a regional conference to go to a national conference, the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. Pac-12 in the Pacific coast area of the country, and then in the Big Ten, which is a coast-to-coast conference. So when you think of, it used to just be like, big contracts and free agency, there'd be a few specific things that were business-oriented or franchise moving. Now it's just completely enveloped in business. Sports is, and I think that's a good thing because it's bringing sports to more people. Sports has become global. Look at the most recent World Series. You had 51 million people viewing Game 7 of the Dodgers Blue Jays World Series across the United States, Canada, and Japan, among the countries. But just in those three, you had 51 million people watching Game 7, and where that may be dwarfed by what the Super Bowl will attract for an audience. That's still a significant number. And to your point about live sports, media networks will still put a premium on the live sports experience because fans do. So most everything else you want to watch today, you just watch when you want to watch it. You can record it, but it's being repeated and it's set up to be for you to be able to consume it at your convenience. But sports, there's something still magical about watching it live, and it's hard not to be aware of what's going on today because of phones. So if you think you can avoid a phone and watch it later, good luck.
But even with like catching up on social media and everything like that, still, I mean, we see it today, and most recently the ESPN kind of YouTube TV dispute that they're having going on. And actually, like I was actually reading it today in class or just looking on Twitter. They're not even close to settling it, right? And I know me personally ruined my whole college football Saturday because you're not able to watch all these games through YouTube TV like on ESPN. So, you have the Alabama game this week. That's going to be on ESPN and ABC. Vanderbilt, Miami got upset last week. That was on ESPN. So you're not able to, you have to find out about that or use, a lot of people use like illegal streaming sites. But it's really kind of remarkable, and that's kind of like gets me going a little bit. It's just looking at how these media companies, right, how they're leveraging, their rights for their legal rights through some of these companies. So the Big Ten just switched over to CBS, and then like the SEC, their rights with CBS kind of dwindled out, expired, and so now they're on ESPN. So it's just really important. I just wanted to ask you that, but just to get back to you a little bit, and more so like what fueled your passion. You, and again, I got to look back at my notes because the list of people that you've had in your class is John Wooden, Jerry West, Bill Walton, Pete Carroll, Al Michaels, Scott Borjas, Leigh Steinberg, Keyshawn Johnson, Larry Scott, Lynn Swann, Baron Davis, Byron Scott, Kevin Love, Shelly Smith, Lee Jenkins, Jeanie Buss, George Raveling, Casey Wasserman, Stan Cunningham, Jamal Wilkes, and World War II hero and U.S. Olympian Louie Zamperini, right?
That was all in 1 week, by the way.
7 days, 24 hours. Each person gets an hour. But
yeah,
through, I mean, George Raveling, unfortunately, he passed earlier a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago. You could kind of say the three guys, I think, just like coaches that meant the most to you: Pete Newell, John Wooden, and George Raveling. What did those guys mean to you personally and in your development, right? In where you are into where you are now.
This might be the rest of the podcast. No, I mean,
take as much time as you want.
No, I was so fortunate and have been so fortunate, and it really started here at USC for me. I'm coming as a community college transfer, trying to find my footing. Just knew I would want to do something sports related, and I got the opportunity to start to make really important connections and build my own network. And along the way, and I grew up in a UCLA family, so I watched Coach Wooden's teams as a kid and growing up, and had a chance to meet him. He was always at the UCLA games and was very accessible. You could just walk up and talk to him, and people did. They would have, it was just amazing thing to see. There'd be a line. It looked like it was a mile long at halftime of all the home games because he sat behind the bench after he retired from coaching, but he was always open to just meet people, take pictures, sign things. And when I started my basketball event to honor Pete Newell, I got a chance to, I just told him one day, hey, I'm going to do this event honoring Pete Newell. Oh, I love Coach Newell, I love Pete. He said he was the best. He was actually the best coach I ever coached against, which I wasn't a bit surprised to hear him say that, because Pete Newell was a phenomenal coach. He might have been heading for a run, maybe not quite like John Wooden's. Hard to imagine a coach leading a team to 10 NCAA championships, 7 in a row. But I will tell you, he'd won one, and he was on his way and got back to the Final Four the next year, and had to retire from coaching at 44 because of health issues. So he impacted the game in other ways. But so when I met him, I was so I'm jumping to Pete Newell, but met Coach Wooden and really started to get to know him through friends of mine connected to UCLA basketball. And then I got a chance to go and spend time with him and at his home in Encino. It was on a street called Margate. I called it the Mecca on Margate because it felt like going to the Mecca, to just be with him, learn from him, listen to him, have great conversations. And then meeting Pete Newell, I was also struck. I knew a little about him. I didn't know nearly as much as I was to find out. And it was mind-blowing how he impacted the game. Then when I got close to him and created this event, we had it for 10 years in the Bay Area. Still hold the record for the largest crowd to ever see a college basketball game in the state of California. That happened in 2000, so 25 years. I was again struck, the same thing with Coach Wooden and Coach Raveling, is so humble. They were giants in their sport. They were contributors to the good of the game. They did things for the right reasons. They were so grounded, and they were so good to people. I think watching them from afar, how they related to people, and what great listeners they were. All three were phenomenal listeners. And I don't know about you, Ashton, but I think of people in my life, and I know who the really good listeners are. And others that aren't as good will say they're not. They know that. They don't. Their attention span is all over the map. And these are guys that accomplished each accomplished so much. Two of the three were part of the greatest generation, the World War II generation, Coach Wooden and Coach Newell. And yet when you and Louie Zamperini you referenced also served in the war, and you bring up some of these incredible things they did and accomplishments, and they would just say, well, we're just doing our job. So it just taught me a lot about helping people. I've always said this about sports too, is to get anywhere in sports, a lot of people helped you along the way. Certainly did me. You don't get anywhere by yourself, especially in sports, because it's so competitive. Whatever you're doing, whether you're playing sports or just want to get into it, working in sports, coaching, whatever it is, so competitive. So you've got to have people that will help you and mentor you and guide you. And I watched those guys do that. They did it with me. They did it with many, many others. I learned from them. And I've always felt like the people that I met along the way, I want to be one of those people that someone looks back and says, I was really fortunate to have someone that took an interest, that gave me some, maybe important advice, opened my eyes to things. That's a big thing, is just maybe just to get you to think about how you can get where you want to go, and maybe here's a way to do it. This worked for me. And just be somebody you can lean on, you can talk to, you can call. I'll be a resource. I'm really motivated by that, because I was that guy, hoping that I could find my way, and I had a couple of breaks that opened doors, and hopefully took advantage. But I was always someone that, when someone indicated they were willing to help, like, I would take them up on that. When you had to work a little bit more at it, because it wasn't just like I can go send them an email. It's pre that, so it might be a business card. It means you have to follow up with a call or a handwritten note. So I was always the person that I would be the guy that would follow up, and so I'm really big on that part too, of just how to follow up with someone so that you can make a real connection.
And I mean, you mentioned connections. Well, first, that was great. Like, I never had the opportunity to meet those individuals, but makes me want to meet them even more. You mentioned contacts, and if we would take your contact list, I mean, I said some of the names here, but even past that, and like try to make it a physical thing, it would probably be a length of football even more. I did, if you would let me, I did want to share, or have you share a piece of advice that you give our class and other classes throughout the years. I don't know if this was something that you came up with this year, or maybe that was the theme of your classes this year, but you talk about finding your separators, right? And how much that means, especially in the industry of sports. Maybe somebody's watching this and they want to start their own, podcast, or try to break through in the world of sports, or whatever it may be. How important, first, what is a separator? What is that? And how important is that in today's society?
I think it's really important. I'm glad you brought it up, and I really do emphasize that in my classes, especially the last few years, when I've continued to see how competitive it is in sports, how competitive it is in sports media, because now there are so many content creators that, with podcasts or with YouTube channels, or have a presence on social platforms. It's like, I talk about finding your separators, because if you want to break into sports in some way, apart from just doing something on your own, which is an option now too, there's no barrier to entry. But otherwise, if you want to work for a team, or you want to work for a league, I got a number of students that work for NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball. Like, how would you sell yourself? I always talk about, in great storytelling, it starts with being able to tell your own story. So sometimes your separator can be your journey, and that journey might really resonate with someone. Ned Colletti, I mentioned, is the former Dodger GM, transition out of his career. He's a scout for the San Jose Sharks, from baseball to hockey, full time. And
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but was it Italy that he is for the Olympics
Yes,
coming up?
he's going to be the general manager of Team Italy, and he has an incredible story. So a separator for him is his journey, how he came from very little, and he was just a guy that worked really hard, took advantage of an opportunity, made that opportunity, like really seized it, because he was given a choice of applying to one of two available jobs in media for the Chicago Cubs. He was from Chicago, but he was out of work. He'd been a sports writer in Philadelphia, and the paper closed. And so a friend said, "Hey, there are two jobs open with the Cubs." So like comes back home to Chicago, and he had a dad that had cancer, and so things were bleak. And he said, to this day, I still don't know why I said it, but when they asked him which of the two jobs that he wanted to apply for, one was media relations and one was in PR for the Cubs, for their communications office, he told the person interviewing him, which was Dallas Green, the lifelong baseball giant, and general manager of the Cubs at that time. He said, if you hire me and pay me a little bit more, I'll do both jobs. I'm like, how did you think you could do both jobs? Well, I could handle it. I work hard. So his separator became his willingness to do something like take two jobs instead of just applying for the one that he was told, pick one of the two to apply for, and I'll do them both. So that kind of became part of his story. And it really helped him land the Dodger general manager's job, because Frank McCourt was so taken, the owner at the time, with his story, that like he really found him connecting with Ned and believing in him. So I think a separator could be any number of things. It might be, I always tell students, don't just say you're a hard worker, and don't just say you have a great passion for sports, because everybody says that. I say make it's not that those two things aren't really important. They're essential, but make that part of your baseline. Besides my passion, besides my work ethic, this is what I feel like I really bring to the table. So my challenge to students and people that connect with me and have these conversations is, find your separators beyond those two things. What is something that you think you might do especially well? And if it is your work ethic, maybe say, you know what, I really would say this. I don't know if you'll ever find, then have really good examples. And then let's see if that really could be a separator. But otherwise, what are those things that make you you? And I think sometimes it takes a while to really figure what those might be. I don't expect somebody to know them right off the bat. Again, that's what you're in college for. You might recognize what they are later after college, but you can at least start thinking about it now. And that's what I try to get students to do, is think about what your separators are.
So, yeah, I mean, you're in a position where you're already established, right? So, I mean, you don't necessarily have to think about that now, but I kind of want to challenge you a little bit. When you were my age, right?
Yeah.
Little Mr. Fellenzer.
Yes. Yeah.
What would you say was your separator?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I don't know whether there was one thing. I think I've always had a pretty good feel for people. I think I'm somebody that that learns easily. Like I can, you could lay out a situation for me and I can figure it out. So I think I'm a quick learner. But I think I'm one of those people that, and I really enjoy connecting with, getting to know people from all backgrounds, all ages. And so, and I think I'm a good connector. So I think that can be a real advantage working in somewhere in sports, is the ability to connect well, whether it might be, if you were working as a general manager, let's say, now you have general managers in college, so you're connecting with recruits, or you're connecting with free agents if it's professional sports, or you're connecting with coaches. You're trying to get alignment between front office and on the field or on the court. So being able to being able to connect well with people, I think, is I think it's a gift. I think my mom was raised by a single mom and grandmother for much of my childhood. And I think my mom, who was an elementary school principal, so she ran a school. So that was like a little company. And when I saw how people responded to her and how they were willing to do anything for her, like, why was that? Well, you know what I found is that she treated people really well. So one of my big pillars is treat people well and with respect. And I watched, and I would go to her schools, and the people that supported her and that went the extra mile for her were like the support staff, the janitorial staff. And those are the ones in an elementary school that you really need to be on the same page to get things done. It can't always go through the Board of Education downtown, or if you do, there's a lot of layers. She could get things done because people would do anything for her. And she never told me this as a lesson. I just observed it. So I think the ability to connect with people, make them feel part of a team and wanted and respected is really important in sports. And so maybe that could be a separator. And I recognize that maybe early on that I could maybe do that.
And we see that today with the kind of like the diminishing relationship between the athlete and the journalist.
Yeah.
Right? Journalists using athletes, and really like as a puppet. I mean, we've seen that long before my time too. I kind of want to get into, before we move into like some current events and the Heisman Award as well. I kind of chopped up the intro a little bit, but this podcast, like the meaning behind like the get back,
and
especially in sports culture, is diving into moments of resilience, growth, and self-discovery, right? The true get back in sports. For you and somebody like me, or somebody taking your class, or somebody that might have, looked into you at this point in your life, they see this long resume, this long list of contacts, and you say, well, this man is really, in which you are, this man is really successful. This man has been through it in the sports world. But when people see your highlights, they don't necessarily see the moments of struggle, of growth. So I want to ask you, if we don't have to get too much into it, but what were kind of like your biggest challenges in breaking into the sports industry, whether that was as a journalist or later as an entrepreneur? What were some of those challenges or struggles that you had to break through, right? The signs of resilience for you?
Yeah, I think early on, it kind of was one problem that I had was I couldn't figure out exactly what my calling was. So I tell students all the time, look, if you know what your calling is, and I say, if there's one part of sports, one aspect of sports that I find students more often than not have, they know what their calling is from a young age. It's the ones that work in sports, that want to work in sports broadcasting. I've always wanted to call a game. I wanted to describe the action. That's usually what I hear is like, well, I know what I want to do. It used to be maybe writing about sports, covering a team. Now it tends to be, like sports broadcasting. I want to be a sideline reporter. I want to do a play-by-play. And a number of my students have gone on to do that at a very young age. Carlo Jimenez is the voice of the Clippers. 2 years out of USC. First job out of college was the play-by-play radio voice of the Clippers. So that's usually what I hear. For me, I liked about 5 different things. Broadcasting was just emerging at USC, sports broadcasting. So it really wasn't a thing you could focus on like you can now. We've got incredible resources at USC and a great media center that we're in right now, a podcast studio. I might have pursued that in a different way. I mentioned that I had an interest in being a general manager in baseball. I had people tell me, gosh, with the way you connect with people, like, why aren't you an agent, which is all about connecting with athletes, with clients. And I wasn't crazy over that world day to day of what I could see of it. I had an interest in, as cable TV was starting to grow and sports on cable TV. ESPN was starting, I had an interest in that, but I didn't really say that's the one thing. So I kind of just let things develop, and what opportunities came my way, and then I connected that way. Worked for the NFL, worked for the LA Times, and then I had a thought, an idea that I wanted to pursue, and it became the Pete Newell Challenge. So I left the LA Times to create this event, and it was one of the great things I've ever been able to accomplish, because of the fact I connected with so many amazing people, starting with Pete Newell. So it all comes back to the people that I met, whatever the job was. So a challenge was figuring things out, what exactly I wanted to do in sports. When you're an entrepreneur, you have to worry about the bottom line, if you can take your idea and turn it into a business. And so early days, I didn't have too many stories of, doors getting shut on my face and being told no. I got a lot of yeses when I said, hey, I have this idea but at the same time, you have to structure, build a company, build an event. All of a sudden I had to negotiate contracts with television networks, the arena where the games were played, the teams. How much do I pay the teams? Where do I get ball boys? Where do I, who decides what music's playing when you walk into the arena? Like all these questions that I had. So I had to learn those things, and I had taken some business classes, but if I had thought I was headed on a path to, be an entrepreneur and create a business, I probably would have taken more. But what I had, instead of the practical hands-on experience of having created a business, I knew a lot of people that had done that and that were familiar with the world that I was diving into. So the next best thing was to have a network that I could tap into. So I was able to get to those people to help me get through those early days when you're really selling yourself. I'm selling a concept of a basketball doubleheader in the Bay Area, but really you're selling yourself, because they've got to believe in you. I'm sitting in an office with the athletic director at Cal, or the head coach at Stanford, or I'm meeting with Mike Krzyzewski or Bob Knight, Dean Smith. I met with all of them about coming out. They've got to believe in you, even if they don't tell you that. That's what you have to go in thinking. So I think my background gave them enough confidence, and I think I spoke with enough confidence, and my vision was out there. We can get this done. So that was, but you have to get that. Those are challenges. You've got to get over those early hurdles.
This Pete Newell event, and I know we were actually talking about could you tell me about this question and how that kind of, but could you tell me about this Pete Newell event? Because this was something I didn't necessarily know. You didn't really mention before until now.
Yeah.
How did you come about this event? Just the experience. Who did you have play in these events?
It's really kind of an amazing thing. I can't say it was an original idea, because the John Wooden Classic had started about 3 years earlier, and I thought that was incredible. It was held in Orange County, near where I grew up in Long Beach. It was in at the Honda Center, where the Ducks play hockey now, and the first year it sold the building out. It had incredible TV audience around the world, and so I met Pete Newell, and it was interesting because somebody I had met along the way in my journey was starting a new sports magazine. He was actually the person that was the editor of it, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're starting the sports magazine. It's a monthly, and we want to do a story on Pete Newell, the basketball coach, the big man guru. He was the general manager of the Lakers. He was the GM when the Lakers traded for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar from the Milwaukee Bucks. He made a historic trade. Not everybody's aware of that." And I said, "Well, I know certainly of Pete Newell and a little bit of his legacy, but I'll do it because I'd like to get to know him better." And so I went up and met him. He lived at the time in Palos Verdes, not too far from where I was. And we sat down, and I remember walking in, and there he was sitting down, tanned, and he was 80. And he was driving a sports car. I mean, he had a Hawaiian shirt on. He had a margarita in front of him. He looked on top of the world. And we sat and talked for probably 3 hours over lunch. And I remember leaving my jaw just dropped. The stories and it was all done and so humble and grounded. I think it was within a few days, no more than maybe a week. I said, how could I bring to the public's attention what this man has accomplished and what he's meant to the game of basketball? I thought of the John Wooden Classic, and I said, maybe we could do something like that somewhere. Now, he lived in Southern California. I lived in Southern California, but his fame as a college coach came in the Bay Area when he was the coach at first USF, University of San Francisco, and then Michigan State, but back to the Bay Area at Cal Berkeley. And then he stayed after he left coaching and became the athletic director at Cal before he came down and became GM of the Lakers. So I thought there's enough going on in Southern California with events, sporting events, and the Wooden Classic. Let's do it in the Bay Area where he was so well known from his days at Cal. So I reached out to a good friend, Jim Herrick, who was the UCLA basketball coach at the time, and said, who are the guys that started the Wooden Classic? I need to talk to them. And I knew they were business guys. That's about all I knew. And it turned out, he said, yeah, I can put you in touch with them. So the guy that started the Wooden Classic, who had since sold the event after the first year, the record-breaking year, he was out of the game, out of the business because he'd sold it. So he was free to talk. So Coach Herrick reached out and said, yeah, I talked to his name was Randy Ryan. And he said, and Randy told me later, Jim called me, Herrick, and said, I really want you to talk to this guy. I want you to talk to my friend Jeff about what he wants to do to honor Pete Newell. And so Randy became a mentor to me. And I would beat a path down to Orange County. We'd meet at this. I remember we met a lot of times. It was either a restaurant or a hotel. And we'd sit in the lobby, and I just took page after page of notes, just legal, yellow legal pad of notes of all those questions I mentioned earlier. How you pay the teams and where you get this, where you get that, how the organization of a game. And what's funny is Randy's daughter, Katie Ryan, is the head of football communications at USC. So I have known Katie since, my gosh, she was probably in middle school. Randy brought her to one of my classes and kind of watched her grow up and take her own pathway to great success in sports. But Randy guided me when I really needed in the early days, and I had a good network, so I had a good feel, and I knew a lot of coaches, and so then I just started to reach out and ask Coach Knight, Coach Krzyzewski, Coach Smith at North Carolina, if I'm able to put this together, and I think I can, would you? And I could barely even finish the question. Would you bring your team out? And they said yes. And you know what? Everyone that said yes did that. So we had over the course. It was in year 2 that we set the record for the largest crowd to see a game in California college basketball history, and then broke it 2 years later when we had this really amazing game between number 1 ranked Duke and number 3 Stanford. Stanford won on a last-second basket by Casey Jacobson. Duke went on to win the national title. Jay Williams, Shane Battier, Mike Dunleavy Jr. It was a star-studded Duke team, and that was in December. They lost to Stanford, but then won the national title, and that happened actually twice. North Carolina came out, lost in our event to Santa Clara of all teams, but went on to win the national title. So it came together. I think I was surrounded by great people to help me build it, and we did it for 10 years, and we had, Indiana, and then Bob and I went to Texas Tech. We had them. He and Pete Newell were close, so that was one of the reasons I wanted Coach Knight, if possible, to come out, and he did twice. North Carolina, Kansas, Michigan State, Michigan. We had Michigan State and Michigan one season. That was really fun. Temple with John Chaney, the incredible Hall of Fame coach. BYU, Georgia, Jim Herrick, had been the UCLA coach, resurfaced at Georgia, and he brought his team out one year. So we were really fortunate, and I give all the credit to that to Coach Newell, because people felt so much love toward him that anything that was going to bring honor to his name and to him, they seemed very willing to come out. And And I was glad that they had the confidence in me that they knew that we could do this. We said we would, and we did it. So I'm really proud of that. Those were really important years for me to connect with amazing people, build a business, see how it works, and just sort of take, like, another part of my life just took shape.
Yeah, and it's amazing when you look at college sports and what that means. I mean, seeing guys go from, just inching closer to their dreams, right? Becoming notable prospects, then seeing them go to the league and, you know, whether it's a basketball hosting a finals trophy or a Super Bowl. I know for you, just seeing that whole process is just something that isn't even, like, words can't define.
Yeah.
That leads me into, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that the cool thing about like my interest in high school sports, which has been there for me since day one, I think, of being a sports follower, fan, is getting a chance to see, as you say, like, kids at that point and what they are starting to see in themselves and emerge as stars. And so my interest in high school football to this day, I always say, has worked kind of hand in hand with being a Heisman voter, because I get a chance to see kids that, Bryce Young is a star quarterback at Mater Dei when I see him, and I actually met him here in this building when he was a recruit in between his sophomore and junior year. He was transferring to Mater Dei from Cathedral High, right by Dodger Stadium. And they asked me to come and talk to him. He had interest in media. So he met and committed to USC about a month later after we met. He and his dad, Craig, were here. And then he goes to Mater Dei and eventually he flips his commitment from USC to Alabama. There was a little bit of coaching instability at USC at the time, so he flipped to Alabama with Nick Saban and won a Heisman Trophy. And I go from meeting him here one day to voting for him for the Heisman. So that was kind of a full circle moment.
Yeah, and speaking of the Heisman, right? Like I said previously, been voting for the award since 2007, and I mean, really, it really is like the most prestigious award in sports to me. Big league awards are like kind of like commercialized in my opinion.
Yeah.
It doesn't really like hit the same when you're seeing like a guy accept the MVP of the NFL, but I feel like when you see a young, like somebody my age, hoisting up this, and it's like heavy, like it's big. So hoisting up this trophy and the speeches that they give. I know we talked about Joe Burrow and how much his speech, what that, how much significance that had. But I think people, and as a voter, you might not think about it, but you are a part in these hundreds of voters. Like, all of you guys are a part of affecting the trajectory of this player's career, right? Because the Heisman Award, I mean, you could say, well, some people that win the Heisman Award don't really fare well in the NFL, or like, Robert Griffin III. I mean, I know he had a great season, but kind of cut short to injuries. Bryce Young, I mean, he's looking, he's stepping it up from, a disappointing rookie year. But what does this award mean to you, getting, affecting these athletes, young athletes' lives, and the significance of that award?
It makes me sometimes just, I like pinch myself thinking, growing up, I'm sure like you grow up following the Heisman Trophy, and I do think it's the one award in sports that has captured the imagination. I think it's largely because, and you bring this up, I think it's largely because of the fact that these are college athletes, not established pros. So when Michael Jordan wins another MVP, you just say, well, you admire his accomplishments. We all do. Whoever wins it. But it's different than somebody that was in high school 4 years earlier that's receiving this award now in college, or 3 years earlier, or even two. These sometimes. You think about the impact it has on their lives, and you think about being on the stage, the college football stage, and you follow them throughout the season. I think the fact that it's one game a week, football is, so the buildup is something, and you focus on candidates start to distinguish themselves early in the season, and it just lends itself to drama and these big stages and these big moments. You have to, they always say you have to have a Heisman moment if you want to win the award to distinguish yourself, to be a separator we talked about earlier. So adding it all up, yeah, it's I always say it's such an honor to be part of the process. I'm so grateful for that, and just being able to have a hand in it. There's just a lot of pride with feeling like it changes the way you watch college football. It does for me. I mean, you got to prioritize seeing the players that you've kind of identified early in the season as ones that are legitimate candidates. And so it's a lot of fun, responsibility. I do a Heisman update every week, which keeps me very in tune to the process, because I rate 1, 2, 3, because you only have 3 lines on a ballot. So it's basically, if the Heisman voting was due today, this is who I would have. So it's a really cool thing, and I'm really honored to be part of the process.
And like 925, I don't know if that number has grown.
I think it's a few more, maybe 930.
But you could probably say that, going back to your separators, out of those 900, 900 plus voters, you're probably the only one that, or maybe a handful, but that engages your students in this weekly process, keeps them up to date, because this was something that, for the past couple of years, you could say the Heisman vote, the running for the Heisman was taken up by 1 or 2 people, if that, right? So like Caleb won it. It
pretty
was
much
him,
just dominated it. Yeah.
Devontae Smith, maybe you could say, but until he had the national, or he won it before the national championship, but he was just amazing. Baker Mayfield, you could say he was hands-on, probably like the hands-on favorite. So we've seen that for a couple of years. Kind of getting into a little bit of current events, though. We've had some players drop out, right? Like John Mateer looked like the favorite. He had an injury, but when he came back, I don't know if
I had him number 1 on my list for a couple of weeks.
They rushed him back. Yeah. Right now, who would you say is like your top, your top 3? Right?
So I think Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback at Indiana, is in a really good spot. Indiana's incredible what they've been able to accomplish, the complete turnaround in 2 years to go from a blue blood basketball program to essentially that same level. I mean, way beyond where Indiana is in basketball now, but almost got feeling like the level when they were at their best in basketball under Bob Knight, like a powerhouse program. That's what they are now. They might have the best coach in the country, in Curt Cignetti. And again, it always goes back to coaching when I look at success of programs, and they made a great hire. So their quarterback, they had a great one last year in Curtis Rourke. He was on my list for a long time, and got votes. But Fernando Mendoza, I saw often as a quarterback at Cal. Great story, son of immigrants, Cuban, and no real scholarship D1 offers out of high school. Was headed to Yale. At the last minute, Cal came along. He took the offer, went to Cal, and did well enough in 2 years to get I think a good deal, NIL deal out of the portal at Indiana. And so I mean, he's now looked at as the possible number 1 pick in the draft if it's a team that needs a quarterback. He's that good, accurate and smart and athletic enough. But I think the one that I take a lot of pride in how I have ranked him already through these first half of the season, and he's currently number 2 on my list, is the quarterback at Georgia Tech, Haynes King, who's an unbelievable combination runner and passer. not the runner that you think of as a dual threat like Lamar Jackson, somebody like that. Not that kind of a runner, but more of a downhill north-south power back, almost like I've called him the among quarterbacks.
The Scatterbo.
Cam Scatterbo, thank you. Yeah, like I was enjoying seeing his rise from afterthought at Sacramento State to Arizona State. I mean, he was doing this in high school, but he had no real significant offers, but went to Arizona State out of the portal and blew up but Haynes King is that same sort of hard-nosed guy. They were undefeated until last week. They had a tough loss at NC State. He threw for 400 yards last week and rushed for 100 more. So this is a guy that's thrown for almost 2,000 yards and has rushed for almost 800 yards, playing in the ACC. And yet I don't feel like he's gotten the appreciation that I would have expected, because he's certainly a known commodity. People are well aware of Haynes King. Came out of Texas. And I think he's been a great story and just an incredibly productive player. So I've got him too. And then I've shuffled a little bit with three the last few weeks, but I got Diego Pavia, the quarterback at Vanderbilt. And I like the story of taking a program that has been traditionally down and really lifting it up. So when you look at things that influence you on a player like that, that would be one of what I call the tiebreakers. If the statistics were fairly similar, what are some of the ancillary factors that would figure into your decision? Well, the team success, of course. How about team success with a program that hasn't normally had team success? So I've got him number 3. So interesting that, you've got quarterbacks that came out of the portal, which probably not going to be newsworthy necessarily very much longer, if it is now even. But and then the quarterback of Mississippi is stood out to me too, Trinidad Chambliss, another one that came out of the portal. So it tends to be heavy quarterbacks, just kind of the world we live in, and the voters need to see. They need to see statistics, and they need to see quantifiable numbers, and it's hard to get that with linemen or other positions
unless you have like a wide receiver that just completely takes over the nation.
And it happens. Or last year, like you had last year with Travis Hunter, you had this unicorn that could do amazing things on both sides of the ball. Takes something like that to take the spotlight away from a quarterback.
I'm going to ask you sort of a bias question. I'm not going to hide my bias at all. I'm a big Ohio State fan.
Yeah.
I can't hide it. What does a guy like Julian Sand, right? What does he have to do to kind of not only just get into that, top 3, but win it? Like, I know betting favorites. I believe he took over Ty Simpson as the favorite, but I don't necessarily like to go off of that, because you talk about team success. Well, a lot of people just base like the whole Heisman voting and favorite off of team success, right? But my thing with Julian Sand is like, yes, he's a freshman, right? Ohio State has the best receiving duo in the nation with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, who has really come on this year.
Yeah.
They have the best defense, right?
Yeah.
They're defending national champions, right? So you could say, well, he's already dealing with a stacked roster. But when you look at him play, especially like these past couple of weeks, he's made them better. Like Ohio State is better across all aspects of their football team. Like the receivers, how they're playing are better, right? I mean, Jeremiah Smith last year was already like, people will say like, well, if he was draft eligible as a freshman, he would still go like top 5.
Yeah.
Right. But the team has gotten better. And then when you compare him and like Fernando Mendoza, depending on if Ohio State gets over like that 4-year drought of losing to Michigan, if they beat Michigan and Indiana finishes, they're going to meet in the Big Ten championship. So that's going to be probably the best game of the season.
There's your answer as far as what you'd say, what he would have to do. And remember when I talked about how fun it was to see a player early in their careers and follow them in their college journey and maybe be a Heisman contender? I saw Julian Sand play as a senior at Carlsbad High School, which is near San Diego County, and they played a game against Inglewood at El Camino College in Torrance. And honestly, Ashton, I would tell you there were probably more people in this building right now, the media center at USC, than there were at that game that night. But we were there to watch this quarterback that I had been tipped off to by the UCLA quarterback coach, Ryan Gunderson, who's now at Oregon State, on the sidelines of another game, watching Nico Iamaleava at Warren High and Downey about 2 years before that. He said there's this really good quarterback at Carlsbad. Didn't even tell me his name. So, okay, file that away. And now that player was a senior, and we got to go out and see Julian Sand. And one of the guys that's part of my group played quarterback in at a high level in high school and in college. And he just raved about him and said he's so smooth. He's like pinpoint accurate. We had seen him in the spring at the Elite 11 quarterback camp showcase. So we saw him there as well. And then we went back and saw him, what was his first game of his senior year. So he's been on my radar for a while. But I don't like the idea of a guy at a brand name school has a big game. So immediately, like, he's on the top of my, I wanted that to work its way. I wanted him to work his way up slowly during the course of the season. So a few weeks ago, I've kind of put him in I have a list that's essentially like high honorable mention besides the top three. And so he got into that, and now I have him, loosely ranked about fifth overall on my top three, and then I have his name second on my honorable mention list. So he's doing everything he needs to do, and I think to finish it off with, a big game against Indiana, if that's what happens, if they're in the conference championship game. But I mean, he's a freshman, redshirt freshman. So it's like, usually it's you get your name established as a freshman, and then you set yourself up for the years after that. So, I mean, he certainly he'll be probably the leading
next year
candidate going into next season. I think this year he could certainly head to head against Mendoza if it's Ohio State, Indiana. If he has the upper hand in that matchup, I think he would probably vault into the top spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Certainly for the majority of voters, I think I could feel that lean. And I would, depending on where Hayden's King is, then he'd be right there with me as well.
And this will probably be like the last leading segment. I thought it was interesting, like just going over. You've been, again, I'm say it again, voting since 2007 on the Heisman Award. So I thought it was interesting. Well, all these players you look at from 2007 to now, right? So many great players. Reggie Bush. I mentioned like Caleb Williams. Two of them come out of USC.
Mm-hmm.
Derrick Henry, Devontae Smith, Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, just to name a couple. I wanted to ask you, what was your top 5 players that you would say you voted for? I wouldn't want to ask you that you ever seen, but as your time as a voter that you voted for, and we can kind of get into kind of like the significance of those seasons.
Yeah.
You can start from like 5 to 1.
Yeah, I would say probably. Caleb would be up there, very high. Tim Tebow would be as well. I'll give you a handful that come to mind, and then we can figure out from within that group how you would want to rank them. But the ones that stick out the most to be the very first one in 2007 was Tim Tebow. I thought, boy, this was easy. this was an absolute no-brainer. And Joe Burrow was an absolute no-brainer. Caleb was an absolute no-brainer. Those were years when the competition wasn't fierce for that spot. They just seized it early and ran with it.
Yeah.
So those were 3 that I would say belong like in a almost their own category of just how much they dominated. I would say Marcus Mariota was a great player at Oregon. I really liked watching him play. I remember in 2011, I had Andrew Luck number 1. I'm going to say maybe the first 10 weeks of the season, and in the end, I ended up voting for Robert Griffin III, because, like I said about Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt, I thought his accomplishment in lifting Baylor, what at the time was different than the Baylor today, was separated himself a little bit from Andrew Luck. Although Stanford, you could say lifting Stanford, but Stanford had had a pretty good run at that point with Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw. So it was like lifting Baylor. So I had RG3. Johnny Manziel was that was a magical season. The one that I think, so those were a handful, and Bryce Young, I felt, he had an amazing season, 2021, 4 years ago from Alabama. The one I felt didn't win it that should have, that really sticks out to me, was 2015. I thought Christian McCaffrey was absolutely the best player in the country. I mean, this is a guy that he broke the record for return yardage that year. Barry Sanders. He was Stanford's leading receiver, and that's a school that's always passed the ball a lot. And he rushed for 2,000 yards, and he finished second behind Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's a great player, and I had him second on my list. I thought he was the second best player. But I think McCaffrey, had he done what he did for any of the SEC schools, as opposed to playing for a school that doesn't have a big following, played a lot of night games, the after dark Pac-12 thing. That was just, it was unfortunate. I don't think he had the right level of exposure, but I thought he had absolutely, I would have put him up among the great seasons in Heisman history.
Yeah. And that's what, when I emailed you, kind of like what we were talking about, was like, well, that can be sort of like not just who you voted for, who you felt should have won, who didn't win. And throughout your time as a Heisman voter, but you tell me, you have a 100% rate. So,
well, people are always asking me, how often have you gotten it right? Have your choices matched with what the vote turned out by the other 930 odd voters? And my answer to that is, I've gotten it right every year.
But so
they haven't always gotten it right.
But you, okay. So
that's what I mean.
Yeah. So
I've gotten it right every time.
Okay.
In my mind. And that's what you're asking, in my mind. And I know they mean it. How often we've been aligned with the. I haven't figured that out. Yeah. But I know I send in my ballot with great conviction every year.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to ask you. So you voted for Christian McCaffrey, but Derrick Henry ended up winning.
Yeah, I had Henry second on the list.
So I took down all these names, right? Tim Tebow, Joe Burrow, Caleb Williams, Marcus Mariota, RG3, Johnny Manziel, Bryce Young, and Christian McCaffrey. No Devontae Smith, no. In terms of like how they measure up, just.
Oh, I thought the everyone, there wasn't anybody on there that I didn't feel was very, very deserving. Now, I will tell you one year that I think I made a mistake. I think the voters did too. And I told him this personally. Ndamukong Suh. I thought he was the best player. Now looking back, and I would say I came to that conclusion watching the championship game in the Big 12 at that time, Oklahoma and Texas. But I'm sorry, Nebraska and Texas. And Ndamukong Suh, I thought, should have won it in 2009. I had him either second or third. I think I had him second on my ballot, and he finished fourth. So I had a strong feeling about him. But when I watched the conference championship game, I said, that's the best player in the country. I made a mistake. And when I got a chance to meet him a few years ago, he was a guest in one of my classes here at USC. I told him that. I said, I made a mistake. You were the best player in the country. And so that he was so dominant for an award that is so goes to a player on offense every year, basically. Last year was what was refreshing about last year is you had a guy that was an incredible
top
defender
two players,
too. Yes,
your top two players weren't quarterbacks,
Right.
Yeah.
And I felt strong that was the right. He was the right person last year, but to make it all the way up to be a finalist and finish fourth as a defensive lineman. You don't have interceptions. I mean, you have sacks. Sacks even more of a an important category that's discussed more now than even was then. Sacks, but I mean, it was just so dominant. But basically an interior defensive lineman, not even an edge rusher that can pile up sacks. That's how dominant that Sue was. And I wish I had thought about that thought about him even stronger at the time. As I said, I think I had him second. He finished fourth.
I'll also give you just somebody to me, like I probably, in terms of like, I started watching college football in 2014. So, but somebody that didn't win the Heisman Award, but was a finalist, Dwayne Haskins, to me that year in 2018, right? I mean, again, back to the Ohio State bias, but I do think he threw 50 touchdowns that year.
He was great.
He didn't lose. Kyler Murray won that year as well. But I think just him, coming in after the Ohio State has been like this top team. I mean, they didn't make it to the playoffs, but he had a great Rose Bowl game that year as well. I mean, he was very, very good.
Yeah, he was. And I think he finished third. I had him either second or third. I felt pretty strong about Kyler Murray that year, but and Tua was outstanding. I think I might have had him second. He had a fabulous year. There's no doubt. And there have been years when sometimes the quarterbacks that they tend to be the finalists have been very evenly matched up with great credentials, and that's when you start factoring in what I call the tiebreakers, like the team and on the biggest stage. Was it on the biggest stage that they shown? Did they have a Heisman moment? You look at some of those other things. That's where I try to see what the full picture looks like for a candidate, and I don't take lightly, even when I've decided who I'm going to vote for, but I want to feel just as convicted about who I have second and third, because that's going to mean a trip to New York for a player or a couple of players, and that's a big deal. Just to be a finalist and get to go to New York and be able to celebrate your accomplishments, even if you don't win it, just to be a finalist and be back there is something. So I try to take that as seriously as I do with who I vote to win the award.
Yeah, because it's four, right? Four.
It isn't necessarily any prescribed number. I think. Okay. I think they're going to settle on four. There have been times when they've been a few more than that. I think three occasionally. They don't want to ever embarrass someone where if it's clearly going to be one of two guys, let's say, if that's just how it develops, is do you want to invite 4 or 5 when the 2 or 3 other ones just everybody knows they're not going to get the awards? So don't think they want to do that. So when there's a drop off in the voting, you always know, like if there's 5 these days, I think if there's 5 that get invited, that means the voting 3, 4, 5 is probably pretty close because they invite them all. But when there's a gap in the votes after they get them, and the balloting is closed, they get them, they look at them, then they make their announcement on who the finalists are. Then if there's 4 or 5, that means there's probably pretty close voting there.
Well, Mr. Fellenzer, this has been such a great episode. We can go on even longer. I mean, we didn't even get to the Dodgers.
All right, right. I'm still celebrating that.
Yeah. But yeah, this has been so great. Thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun to get back, man. It's been so much fun to see you behind the microphone doing such a great job as a host. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you guys, whoever is watching. Thank you guys for tuning in to a long-awaited episode of the Get Back podcast. We will see you on the next one. I'm Ashton Griffith. Have a good one.